Okay, and we will see if that is currently up and running. I put in a placeholder video, and I realize now that, yeah, I just did that shit without really thinking about it.
There's a comet streaking through a rider's mind. Hellbound for the soul, leading down behind. It whispers low, the pages pile high. My father, old friend, let the dream die. But I've been swinging this hammer since 2005. Temporary tales keeping hope alive. 10 books with page turns more on my own. 26 novels, I ain't done yet, no.
Okay, that's that went live already. All right, shit. I should have let that run a little longer. Should have expected there'd be a few hiccups, but that tends to be very me. Not the most clean and professional at this. Just getting kind of some hiccups worked out, hopefully. Trying to use the new canvas layout, and let's see if we can get some sharing out here. I know not the best way to start things off with being, okay, he's live, he's already on screen, and he's going to be tooling around on his phone instead of actually paying attention. And it's like, crap. Well, that did not go how exactly I wanted it to. But what can I expect from myself? I should expect better. I really should. I'm just not that great at this. And share that there. There we go. And try the new canvas setup. Paste. There we go. There we go. We'll see if that yields anything good. Suppose I could do one more place. Let's try groups. My groups. If this will load up. Again, I'm testing out. Canvas layout. And hopefully they'll approve that on the Rumble group. We'll see. All right. There we go. Wait, there we are. Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins-Treworgy, also known as Baron of Sidious. I do apologize for the probably close to 5 minutes of dead air as I was setting up. Really should have done that, setting up stuff before I clicked the go live. But again, I'm not the most professional at this, and I'm finally trying out the new canvas layout. Well, not new, it's been out for a little while now on Rumble Studio, but I have been very hesitant to give it a second shot. I did try it when it first got rolled out. I fumbled that pretty hard, and was feeling a bit sketchy about trying it again. So the handful of streams that I've done since then have all been through the legacy canvas layout, the older one. 30 something media, greetings and salutations. Thanks for popping in to say hello. Not much is going on. I wanted to take the opportunity to natter on a little bit about the current state of publishing, especially in the small and mid-sized press arena. That tends to be my area of interest and activity more than anything. And just want to chit-chat a little bit about that and go over a few things that I picked up from Publishers Weekly as well as Predators and Editors, which are a couple of sites and services that I frequently go to for my sources of information and updates on the publishing business. And yes, Tom, as Tom says, blah, 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 this is all sidetrack nonsense. I know I should probably get right into it, shouldn't I? But it's good to see you gents here. So the current state of things, Dan, Furious Dan, greetings and salutations, brother. Good to see you pop in shortly. I don't know if you're at work and just listening in, if you've got an opportunity to just kind of sit back and listen, or if you're actually active for a little bit. And sidetracking is fun. It can be, unless you're a complete spurg out like myself. But I'm going to, if it's not too much out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the stuff that I've been reading up on the last couple of days regarding the state of the publishing industry. Predators and Editors recently released their most up-to-date listing of currently available and open for submission writing competitions that they generally go through the entirety of the internet, which is rather a large database to try and cull through and find currently open and available writing contests that are accepting submissions. The way Predators and Editors compiles these lists is every month they will go through, every 1 to 3 months actually, because they don't do it consistently every month. But every 1 to 3 months, they'll go through and discover and they'll look for writing contests that are currently open that have a submission deadline no sooner than 2 months out. They try to list these writing competitions and contests that still have open availability for submission and that still have between 30 to 60 days of available opportunity for people to submit their works to. All right, Dan, well, thanks for popping in, and we'll see you again later on. Possibly I'll see you in the chat for if there is a show, if Digny is running a show later on today. I can't remember if they have a network show going on this afternoon. I think they do. But I'll probably see you in the chat there later on this afternoon as I head into my day job. But currently, Predators and Editors has 78 open and available calls for submission to writing contests. The other guidelines that Predators and Editors uses when they specify this list or when they post up this list of writing competitions, they are all for short stories or microfiction, meaning they're typically looking for stories between 500 to a maximum of 10,000 words in length for any submission that they take on. So these are not exceptionally long stories, they're not novellas, they're not even novelettes. They're looking for short stories between 500 to 10,000 words. This is the kind of the sweet spot, the target sweet spot for most writing competitions in the small to mid-sized publishing press arena because of pay rates. Typically speaking, the pay rate for a short work of fiction can range on average anywhere from 0.2 of a cent per word, which is abysmal. Obviously, that's kind of dog shit. Upwards of 5 or 6 cents per word. Now, I understand that does not sound doesn't sound good, doesn't sound impressive, doesn't sound like it's really much of a such for anything. Um, you know, it certainly does not engender a great deal of enthusiasm for most people who are like, wait, that sounds like pretty shitty low rate. But bear in mind, at the top end, if you're looking at 5 cents per word and you've got a 10,000 word story, if it gets accepted, you're looking at a $500 payday if your work is accepted. Now, on average, most of these literary contests and magazines that have open calls for fiction, the average is 2 cents per word. Now, if you've got a 10,000 word story, I was going to point. Two. You're looking at $400 for your average payout, roughly, if it's a 10,000 word story. So they can be relatively lucrative if they have a call for something of 10,000 words in length, and if you are writing a story of that maximum available length. That's where you can find yourself actually looking at a pretty decent payday if the story is accepted for publication. There's always that qualifier. Not only does the work have to meet the length requirement of the contest, it has to get accepted for publication. That's not always easy, and many of these literary contests and magazines, they've been around long enough that they have a fairly established bar of entry for quality. Now, some of these contests have been blasted out of existence, largely because of the heavy reliance for many younger authors and storytellers to rely on LLMs or AI to write up the vast majority of the bulk of their stories. It's become anathema to the writers' contest arena. And you've got literary magazines like publishing houses, rather, like Bantam Del Rey. You've got Viking Press. You have Allworth's. Ryan Roger Athay says, remember to like the stream. Good to see you, Ryan. Thanks for popping in for the show briefly. Not sure how much time you've got to tinker around, but it's good to have you here. So after going through and looking at the pay rates for each of these contests, like I said, the general average for most of them is 2 cents per word. And for the vast majority of them, the expected or required length is approximately 3,000 words. Now, that's the average. That's not all of them. That is the kind of mean or median level that they're looking for their entries for. A few of them they're well worth it, and some of them have pay rates that are fixed, wherein if you're published, there is a fixed amount you will be paid for your submission. They don't pay per word. That's far more prevalent these days. The primary practice, the most common practice for most writing contests and literary magazines since the mid-1950s has been to pay a rate that is given out per word. However, since approximately 2015, have I got that right? Yeah, 2015, the most common practice has been to offer a set rate per publication, so that it really doesn't matter so much what the word count is for payment purposes. So authors are not trying to pad their numbers. They're not trying to insert unnecessary fluff. I personally think that's probably a good thing. Harlan Ellison, one of science fiction's greatest storytellers, he who wrote I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, fantastic piece of fiction, absolutely soul-burning. He said that if you can cut out words, do so. Because nothing is going to help your technique as a storyteller more than trying to find ways to both illuminate and illustrate without excessive padding. And he's absolutely correct. I apologize for doing this so quickly, but I have to hit the bathroom. I will be right back. Not going to leave you with absolute silence in a chair, however. I don't like doing that. So I'll throw on something for you folks to listen to, at least in the absence. Where do we go here? Here we go. All right. Back in a moment.
Troubles don't vanish through a million, smoke climbing over crooked spires. Every prayer tastes like iron, every dawn burns out in wire. Old saints calling crumbling stone, watch drunks and devils trade names, blood on the teeth of the river, ash in the throat of the rain. Black rain over a million, falling hard on the desperate and the dead. This town keeps its secrets breathing in a stranger's trembling hand. Black rain over a million, sting my cold, mark my name. I walk these haunted stories, and the stories walk back through my veins.
You know, Tom, I could have done that just to be a smartass. Probably should have. Just to keep up that, maintain that sort of, haha, I'm a jackass. But I try not to be that much of a jackass. My normal level of jackassery is, well, it makes do. But anywho, over the last couple of days, whilst going through the listed contests that are open for available submission through Predators and Editors, I wanted to look through and see what the guidelines were for each of these contests. Sadly, you have to kind of click on each one in order to open the page portal for that specific contest or that specific publisher or literary magazine. And I did not have the time or patience to go through all of that. So I asked a couple of friends to assist me with it. Colleagues of mine who are also in the small press / independent press realm. Mostly folks who I'm friends with on Substack. And when we got together our numbers, we came up with the following information. Of the 78 currently listed open and available writing contests from Predators and Editors' latest listing, 53 of them, 53 out of 78, listed a specific preference for submissions from authors who are members of the LGBT, LMNOP plus, or specifically BIPOC authors, Black, Indigenous, Peoples of Color authors, or to have the material of the story in alignment with themes vital to those specific groups and communities. Now, this was a specific preference. This was not mandatory in their guidelines. Still, when you state outright that you are specifically looking or will give deference to authors of a particular community, you're already, in my view, starting off on the wrong foot. This is supposed to be about the art of creative narrative. Who the author is behind the pen or the keyboard is supposed to matter a whole hell of a lot less than the quality of the material they create. The story is what's important, not the demographic breakdown of the author in question. I don't give a shit about what they look like or what they do in the bedroom. I don't care. And Tom says, so they prefer stories that will likely not sell. Pretty much, except there are a few instances where this is not necessarily the case. Of those 53 that were listing a specific preference, 17 of those submission calls were exclusively for members of the Rainbow Mafia. However, and I will note that the websites and magazines that have those specific guidelines or requirements, their entire identity as a publication is focused on the LGBT whatever community. So it's kind of baked into the entire process for them as publishers. I have personally no qualms with that. If your literary outlet is called Pride Fiction, which was the case for one of them, you go in with an expectation. That's kind of their whole raison d'etre. Okay, that's fine. I have no room to bitch on that one. Why? Because it's right out front. They're being honest with you. Right at the front door. Hey, this is a literary website that specifically focuses on this community and this kind of story. I'm not likely going to throw one of my stories at them because it's not aimed for that specific community. Okay, I can't bitch. I mean, I could, but what good would it do? Now, Publishers Weekly also has listings that they put out for literary magazines and websites that have ongoing open calls for submission for works of fiction. And right now there are 25 such openings. 11 of those open calls through Publishers Weekly, 11 of the 25 have an open preference for the LGHDTV community of authors. This is an ongoing trend. This has been going on for quite some time. 3 of the listings from Publishers Weekly are looking for exclusively authors from the BIPOC setting, the Black, Indigenous, persons of color amongst the authors. 4 are looking exclusively for female authors, for women, or those who identify as women. Seems kind of self-destructive there, but okay, moving along. That leaves, from Publishers Weekly, 7 of the 25 available open calls open to authors who are anything outside of those realms, which would be anyone who is straight, white, or male. Now, again, by and large, I try not to growl or grumble about these things because what can you expect? This has been going on in the realm of fiction for decades. This whole thing started in the publishing realm, in the publishing arena, because it was seen as an easy, soft target. Red Pill Rebel, greetings and salutations. Thanks for popping into the Storyteller's Corner. Not used to seeing too many folks from Sarge's crew here, but it's good to have you, brother. Always happy to have you. Anyone from Sarge's group is always welcome, especially if anyone can get a hold of LB Weaver and get his arse in here. But all of these calls for submission to literary magazines and contests made me curious. Okay, there is a subsection of the small and independent press realm that is expressly and explicitly Christian publishing, oftentimes they get derided for being ham-fisted and exceedingly preachy, for good reason. A lot of their material is absolutely pound you over the head with the message. It's a different the message than what has been the prevailing message from most of popular culture for the last 20 years, because it is expressly Christian-based publishing. Tom, stuck in the South. Companies seem to think there is a hidden potential customer base that is based on shit not having anything to do with the matter of the subject. Yeah. Yeah, they think that there's like a ninja class that's going to sneak into theaters or sneak into the games marketplace or sneak into the bookstore and snatch up all these books in huge volumes, and then that audience doesn't show up. Now, I mentioned the other day that Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey did have a weird kind of ninja group for its audience. People who went to hate watch it, hoping to blast it to absolute smithereens, as well as the, quote, modern audience who wanted to send representatives to try and play opposition to the chuds. Good. Thank you, Red Pill. Thank you for messaging LB. It'll be good to see him if he pops in. Now, as I said, I followed Publishers Weekly and Predators and Editors listings to try and find if there were open calls from Christian magazines or Christian publishing houses. There are currently 2 open calls that recently went out for Christian fiction. And this was back in March and April. One of the open calls for submission went out from Guiding Light Press, and another one went out from Ordained Press. These are small publishing houses that have a specific focus on publishing works from Christian authors looking for Christian-themed material. These calls went out in March and April. Both open calls have been shut down. The first one was shut down because the publishing house or the literary magazine in question was facing a discrimination lawsuit for calling for specifically Christian fiction and declining a submission from an open atheist author. They looked through this author's submission, and the story itself passed muster. It passed all of their guidelines, and when they went and did a social media look through of this author, they found that this author's social media was filled with anti-Christian, anti-biblical ravings, rantings, and what have you. And they informed her, hey, we have done a background check on you as an author on your social media, and based on your activity, we cannot work with you. We will not publish your piece. Thank you for your submission. Have a nice day. This was a free contest. There was no submission fee. She was denied publication. She turned around and sued for discrimination. Before that lawsuit could even be arbitrated, Guiding Light shut down their entire operation because they could not afford a lawsuit. This was a very small publishing house. It was run by 3 people. They just said, you know what? We're done. We can't afford litigation. We're out. Ordained Press faced a threat of a lawsuit. There was no actual filing, but they, in response, ended up also shutting down the contest. They just withdrew the open submission and said, we're not doing this. And in that case, it was not that they had denied any publication, but they were receiving so much antagonism that they said, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're not ready. We're a small outfit. We're not going to do an open market call. In both cases, I almost have to think, especially with the first one, with Guiding Light, they got a story submitted to them that met all of their criteria. The story itself met their criteria. And then when they looked into the author, they said, we don't want to work with this person. I have some mixed feelings about that because the story itself met their guideline criteria. Why not then publish the story? If the story itself meets your criteria, shouldn't you give it the opportunity to be represented in your publishing lineup? The author themselves should have nothing to do with the quality of the story so long as it meets all of the criteria. So I was left a little hesitant. And my initial response was going to be to say, Guiding Light did the wrong thing. They should have said, regardless of your personal background, we're going to go ahead and publish your story. I initially thought they did the wrong thing by saying no. However, going back through and reading through their initial guidelines from Publishers Weekly, when I had followed the hyperlinks back to their initial submission guidelines, it states in the guidelines that there will be a background check on each contributing author. And if there is any conflict of interest between the author and this publishing house, we can and or will potentially decline publication. This author, this antagonistic author, this antagonistic atheist, saw right in the guidelines that there was going to be a background check on the author of the work, and that based on that background check, they might be denied. She knew what she was doing. She knew they were going to look into her. And based on that, they said no. So yes, my initial take was they did the wrong thing. The quality of the story was high enough. It was well constructed, and it met the story criteria. That should have been enough to say, all right, we accept, it meets our criteria, it's of a high enough quality that we want it in our catalog of stories for publication. Welcome aboard. But they had this guideline. They had this specific prohibition against not being conducive to their values. That was in there. That predicate was in their guidelines. I don't like siding with the company. I don't like siding with a corporation, no matter how big or small. But that guideline was there. Whether this author didn't see it, didn't read it, or didn't comprehend it, that's a whole other matter. Maybe she could have said, okay, I didn't read that before, I'm sorry. Thanks for your interest and for saying it was quality enough to consider. Yeah, and Tom, that's the thing is, there's a difference from my perspective between an atheist and an anti-theist. If you look back in the YouTube skeptic community from back in the early 2010s, they were willing and able to make the distinction themselves in their conversation circles between people who were just, they didn't believe, or they were highly, hugely, deeply skeptical, They wanted some kind of proof, and those who were just antagonistic shit slingers. They made the distinction. They were willing to admit to the distinction. We've slid back to a state of they all kind of get lumped together and they're not willing to differentiate between one another. They're just all vaguely non-believers, and that's fine. Yeah, the atheism plus shit, that's what really, that kicked off a whole lot of differentiation that made it obvious who was openly hostile and who was just, they just didn't buy in. And again, I have no qualms with that. Just please make certain that you are making it obvious. Now, that is the current state of things in the publishing realm for story contests, specifically short story contests. Yes. Another element in the small press realm that I am finding myself quite happy with, actually, is in the arena of small or independent press comic book publishers and distributors. There's been a lot more regional or region-specific publishers in the United States, where you've got these smaller comic book publishers who are kind of banding together artists and authors or writers of comic book series and stories, kind of clustering together and forming their own kind of enclaves in order to try and pool together their resources to attain greater distribution potential for small single title outlets or teams. And you've got writer artist teams or solo creators who are banding together, 4 or 5 of them to a group, to form a publishing imprint, a comic book publishing imprint. I benefit greatly from this thanks to my local comic book shop. There's a fellow named Russ Duggar who's doing a cute little series called Ninja Penguin. He's only got 2 issues out. I own a couple of copies of each issue. I've got a signed copy of issue 1 right here. Oh wait, that's issue 2. Where is my signed issue 1? Right here. Ninja Penguin by Russ Duggar. And he swung by my local comic shop a couple of months ago to do a signing and sit down and chit chat with folks, with regular customers and the guys who own and operate the shop. And he's part of or in partnership with an operation known as Lesser Known Comics, LKC. And he did some custom artwork for their cover to kind of promote them and to promote his own work. What I really like about this is for the cover, in the background, the comic book shop that they're in front of, this monster is destroying. It's Story Arc Comics and Collectibles, which is my local shop. It was really kind of neat that they did that for him. I thought it was pretty awesome. But Lesser Known Comics, it's a group of 6 artists and writers who work on these small indie stories or small indie titles that they're collaborating together to try and operate as their own small regional comic press. They don't have wide distribution. And I have been finding myself thinking, I understand that it would probably be a foolish endeavor or kind of pointless, but I would love to see if there would be a way to get them hooked up with someone like Eric July over at the Rippaverse, who has got the distribution thing going pretty solidly. because these guys are talented, and I'd love to see them get more coverage and get more exposure, to have their work put out there a little bit more. Particularly Mr. Duggar with Ninja Penguin, because it's a family friendly kind of kids comic. It's silly. It's a cute little story, and the artwork's really good. I enjoy it. Let's see. Showcase a couple of pages here. It's very reminiscent for me of kind of almost like a Nickelodeon or Disney kind of Phineas and Ferb aesthetic. Um, it's just cute shit, you know. Ninja Penguin. Um, I know the guys. I know Mr. Duggar is not on X, but he is on Instagram. I don't have Instagram, so it kind of cheats me out of that. But he also did a couple of specific little artwork cards that the guys at the comic shop set aside for me. It was pretty cool. He did the characters from K-pop Demon Hunters as his little ninja guy, and he did up one for each of them for my kiddos, because my kids are big fans of that movie. But I'm holding on to these until my sons are of an age where they can appreciate the value of a one-time thing. And I don't just mean the monetary value. I met Mr. Duggar at the comic shop. I shook his hand. I chatted with him for a few minutes about the current state of art and his particular style and his techniques. Yeah, and look, comic books are great for that, Tom. That's actually how I'm getting my older son to start reading. Was starting off with comic books. I started him off with a couple of issues of Spider-Man. And it works because he likes the character. He loves the little Spidey and Friends cartoon. So when I told him, this is based on a long-running comic book series, buddy, and we've got a comic shop now right up the street. Do you want me to get you a couple of issues or something? And he's like, yeah, sure. That's what I've been reading with him. During our reading time in the mornings, I sit down with him and read through a couple of pages of Spider-Man, or I was reading him some of the Energon Universe Skybound G.I. Joe until we got to issue 3, when I read through it before bringing it home, and I was like, I'll collect it for myself, but I'm not going to let him read this. I don't want him getting too much into all the volatility that is in that series. So I'm trying to stick with the lighter material. There's not a whole lot of it. Thankfully, he likes the Dogman books, and I've got the first 6 of those for him. And we've read through the first 4 of them together. Him, myself, and his little brother Colin, my younger son. And they're working through and trying to sound out the words, but I'm not doing the whole word instruction with them. I'm trying to use the more old-fashioned phonetics or phonics to teach them to read, and to try and get them to understand prefixes, suffixes, to get them to understand how words are constructed and how you can glean meaning from context from surrounding words. It's a little bit of a challenge because they're only 7 and 5, but we are making some progress. Tom says, I didn't realize I didn't mind reading when I discovered whole genres that had been kept from me. Yeah, it can be devastating to recognize, oh shit, there's some really neat stuff out there that I was never made aware of because no one thought to say, maybe you need a particular type of story to catch your interest. And yeah, Tom, public schools especially, are not, they're not aimed at getting kids these days to really to read for enjoyment, for entertainment. It's all about general instruction and reading specifically towards issues of the current thing, which there's no thematic reading instructed. They're not teaching kids, here's a story, or take a pick of these various stories, these books, and try to find for yourself what theme in the story speaks to you. What are you taking away from this tale? Not a summary of the events, not a book report, but more, can you find what meaning was in the story? And tell us in your own words what that meaning is. Now, I've tried very lightly to get my older boy to understand this concept. And the only one I've come away with thus far that I was overjoyed that he took this away was when we read that first Dogman book. First of all, he said, that's really weird. They put a dog's head on a guy's body. I'm like, yeah, there's a certain amount of Frankenstein in there. And he just went, huh? I said, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's this great gothic story about a scientist who creates a guy from the various body parts of other people. And my son went, that sounds gross. I'm like, it is gross. But it's also fascinating because it prompts you to question, what is life? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to cross into the realm of that which only God should do? But we can certainly start with a kidified version of Dogman, who is a Frankenstein creature. LB Weaver, greetings and salutations. Thank you to Red Pill Rebel for letting LB know that we are live here. Good to see you, brother. Tom says, I remember turning in a book report as a child. Got a failing mark because I stated the book was boring and hard to follow. Can I highlight this? Okay, I can. All right. Trying out the new Canvas layout. Forgive me for being a little slow on the uptake for doing this. And then tag. Oh, and it goes right back. All right. So it works just like the old Canvas. Good. But yeah, working with my son on reading through that. And when we finished it together, I asked him what was his favorite thing about the Dogman book. And he kind of laughed. He said, well, Dogman's silly because he's a man that acts like a dog. I'm like, yeah, that is pretty silly. What about that do you think is important? He didn't really have an answer right away. And that was fine. But then when we read through it again, his favorite thing was how Dogman always tried to do what he was asked. I said, okay, why is that important? And he just said, he's a dog. Dogs should do what they're told. I'm like, oh God, okay. Well, maybe there's something in there about, pet ownership. I wasn't sure what to make of it. But he seemed a little frustrated. I'm like, why are you upset, buddy? He goes, he did what he's told because he's a cop. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe there's something there to think about. Duty. His duty as an officer of the law. He took an oath. The canine unit was also a police dog. So maybe there's something in there that you can conjure up or cobble together about duty, about following through on the oaths and promises you take. And my son's only 7. He just kind of looked at me cross-eyed like, what? What are you talking about, Dad? And I kind of threw my hands up. It's a work in progress. I'm trying. But I really do hope that I can convey to my children how important it is to look at the material that you take in, the fiction that you choose to engage with, and can parse out the genuine benevolent messages that could be deciphered. I'm not always a fan of doing that, though, for a couple of reasons. For one, I'm not a big fan of the Roland Barthes death of the author theory, which is a postmodern analysis tool set that I have a love-hate relationship with. And I've talked about this, I've banged on about this, God, what is it, Tom, a dozen times? I've rambled on and ranted on ad nauseum about Barth's death of the author. I have a love-hate relationship with it because I can see and acknowledge the utility of the tool set of analysis that Barth introduced to the lexicon. There's definitely positive benefit to be gained from parsing through the meaning and messaging of a story if there's something genuinely there. Not a problem. Not a problem, LB. Working and lurking is perfectly fine. I appreciate you taking the time to stop in. If you can't stick around, there's no need. But I do appreciate you being here. Always. Anyone who is listening or watching, you are appreciated for tuning in, for turning up. According to the studio metrics I've got here on the screen, I've got 8 people here. That's actually pretty decent for me, particularly for an unscheduled show. Shit, even if I were to schedule one, I doubt I'd get more than a dozen people. Let's face facts. I'm not exactly a highly known quality. I pop up in a lot of different places. I pop into the chat on a lot of different shows. Usually shows centered around video games and pop culture. But there I am, saying my hellos and occasionally dropping a Rumble rant or a super chat when I can afford it. I feel kind of bad. I nipped into Slay Every Game's show yesterday. When he was doing an afternoon stream, and I dropped a $5 Rumble rant to say, don't forget to slay every game. Also, slay every book, particularly the works of one Joshua T. Calkins-Treworgy. Shameless self-promotion engaged. Or away! And he got a chuckle out of it. And that is the majority of what I do when I am able to throw $5 or $10 at somebody as a Rumble rant or a super chat, is I kind of look at it as, okay, I don't have a marketing budget. I don't have an advertising budget. But I can be a little bit of a nuisance with folks who enjoy me, at least, so they won't take too much umbrage when I do that for self-promotion purposes. It's like, it feels dirty to do that, because I am playing on their good faith that they read out loud their Rumble rants and super chats. And I am taking advantage of that to throw $5 at them as kind of a tricky little marketing or advertising move. And it feels a little gross. There is one upside that makes it not feel quite so gross. At least I know that the money going to the people who I send Rumble rants or super chats to, I actually like them. And I actually support what they're doing. And for the most part, I support the messages that they're putting out there. So it doesn't feel like a waste. It doesn't feel like I'm just whoring myself, because something good will be gleaned out of it on the back end. People who I enjoy and who I genuinely support their endeavors, they're going to get money out of it too. They're getting money out of it. It's not much. It's really all I can afford. But I'd rather do that and give that money to someone who I think is good people than scrimp and set aside $100 for some no-name, faceless company or advertising firm to throw one poster up on some place around my town. While local marketing is good, and I would love to promote and produce local marketing or advertising, I don't have the budget for it. I don't have the time or the money or the resources, and I don't know those people. They are there specifically and explicitly to make money off of my hopes and dreams of getting my name and work out there. That's it. It's just a transaction. With the folks who I watch on stream, whether it be on Rumble, YouTube, Kick, wherever, I actually enjoy those people. And I'm more than happy to throw them $5 or $10 here or there to do essentially the same thing, to try and get my name out there. And even if I don't see any return on it, that's fine. At least the money goes to somebody who I actually like. That's all on that. Sorry to ramble and be sidetracked there. But it's part of the publishing business, so it's thematically somewhat appropriate. Ramble away! I'd be careful about throwing my right arm out there like that. Someone's going to accuse me of throwing the Roman salute. Now, in terms of my TBR, my to be read list, talked to my buddy Cortex way back in April. I ordered this book, Rust Colored Rain. He recommended it to me, I want to say almost a year ago. And back in April, I finally ordered and got my copy of it. And it was on my TBR. It was on my to be read list. It was a good 8 to 9 books deep in my to be read list. And it was not going to be my next read, but I have bumped it ahead of Rabbits because Otto Schaefer is a independent author. This is a small press publication. Sound Eye Press, which is the publishing outfit, they're what I would refer to as a mid-sized publisher. They're not huge, but they're also not part of a larger conglomerate. They are their own mid-sized independent publishing house. They're mid-sized. They're bigger than a lot of the ones that are strictly online operations. There is an actual physical location for their offices. So this is it's a mid-sized publisher. Mid-sized publishers have it even harder than your small independent press houses for a couple of reasons. For one, they have actual physical, tangible overhead. They have overhead costs, operational costs, above and beyond just running a website. Many of them have their own printing press. This is not cheap equipment. Some of your average printing press to produce even a trade paperback hardcover, or not trade paperback, what is referred to as a modern trade paperback, the 6x9 size. The presses to produce this book, they're not cheap. You're looking at between $10,000 to $15,000 for the machinery, for the equipment. Now, yes, that's a one-time cost. Then you have to maintain it. You have to keep it functional and operational. You have to make sure you've got the materials required to operate the press, that you've got cutters, that you've got bulk paper, that you've got pulp paper available, you've got all the glue for the binding, that you have the 14 to 18 weight paper cover material to be printed out and then bound to the actual book. It's not cheap to operate a physical printing press. If you get big enough and you are successful enough in order to operate one fucking huzzah to you, sir or madam. So, a mid-sized publisher has got it pretty rough. They're not outsourcing their printing. They're doing it in-house. So, I want to support that. That and Brother Cortex recommended it. He said it was a pretty awesome horror read. I trust his taste. So I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to start reading this one today. Now, it's not going to be for a in-depth analytical read. This is apparently the first in an ongoing series. The second title just recently came out apparently is on Audible. That's how Brother Cortex took it in. But this is the Rack and Ruin series. This is book 1 of Rack and Ruin. So I will get started on reading this starting today. I will more than likely do a kind of a quick capsule review for it when I'm finished, kind of like I did for this. I did up and uploaded a video review, a basic review of this Star Trek: The Kobayashi Maru by Julia Ecklar. You can check that video out. It was a decent read. It was entertaining. Good character work. I've still got about half of that shelf to read through, and about half of these tomes of mythology and legends to work my way through eventually for comparative mythological analysis. But I'm going to be wrapping up here pretty shortly. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, any inquiries that you feel that you'd like to throw out there, this would be the time. Let me just make sure this is tracking. Yep. What's that? Oh, okay, that's not available. All right. Oh, that's where the banners are now. Okay. It's a separate little button. Oh, okay. There's countdown overlay. See, I didn't tool around. I didn't mess around before going live with all of this stuff. There's live chat. Oh, that's for dynamic display. Viewership stats. What's this? Take live calls on stream. Okay. So this is all stuff that I probably should have looked at before just clicking the go live button. Should have familiarized myself with the available tools before just saying, fuck it, let's go live. But I'm not a professional at this. I'm not even semi-professional, folks. You know that. If you're familiar with me, I just kind of click the live and ramble. And then I have a lot of dead air at the end because I'm waiting to see if anyone has any last questions or comments to poke or prod me into staying on longer than I should. Usually someone will toss something up there to get the gears turning in this patchwork I call a brain. That's putting it politely. Giving myself a little more credit perhaps than I am due. Oh wow, there's a lot of other people who are live right now. Oh, and Furious Dan reposted the link. Well, that was good of him. That was awesome. Okay. Oh, Ryan reposted it as well over on X. That was nice. See, it's good to have folks in your corner, especially when you're a small timer, when you are a relative nobody. And just to clarify on that, I have had the same channel on YouTube now for 19 years. I have been on YouTube as Byron Osidious for 19 years. That's kind of sad in its own way. Never had more than a little over 1,000 subscribers. I'm way down below that these days. I think let me actually look that up. I think I have around 600. Let's go ahead and do that. View the channel. 692 subscribers. So not exactly impressive there. But it is what it is. So I've never been a big character or a big presence. A lot of the growth that I had was way back in the day on an early live streaming service called Blog TV. That's where I met a lot of the folks who I still chat with occasionally, including Tom Stuck in the South, including Belgian Dan, medicated, lubricated YouTuber. I miss Dan. He's a good guy. But it's where I met a lot of the folks who I've maintained contact with in the online realm for quite some time. Was through Blog TV, a combination of Blog TV and YouTube, sharing kind of in the skeptic community, even though I am myself a person of faith. Now, mind you, I am not a heavy-handed thumper of that faith because I don't count myself as a good example. I'm really not. I do what I can. Yeah, Blob TV. Those were the days. Back when Tech the Noob, Jake Winbury, who I still chat with routinely. He's a good dude. Oh, someone else who is a good gentleman, and I would recommend folks give him a look, would be one Herman P. Hunter and his novel The Revenant and the Tomb, or rather his premiere novella, The Revenant and the Tomb. This was, hands down, one of the best independent works of fantasy fiction I have read in the last number of years. This is an excellent start and introduction to a series. I know there's a few more entries that are out there I need to track down and get a hold of so I can continue reading this series. This was a fantastic premiere for a small press fantasy author. Herman P. Hunter, The Revenant and the Tomb. Highly recommend it. You can find a copy of this in ebook format on Amazon. Right now, last I had checked, he was selling it. He had a sale going for $1. $1 for an excellent ebook, or you can pick up a physical copy of it on Amazon as well. That's where I got my copy. I grabbed it on. He had a sale running. It was only $9.99, so I grabbed a copy of it at that point. And I have been much happy to have gotten that. He's also on X. You can follow him. Just search for Herman P. Hunter. Good dude. He's been going through some work trying to clean up his newest entry in the series. So I got to get caught up, obviously, because I think he's on his 4th or 5th entry into the series. So I've got some catching up to do. As a reader, I am ashamed. But my to-be-read list is longer than my frickin' arm. So I got to get through Rust-Colored Rain and then Rabbits and then go through and do my Finally, a reread of Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I have not read since I was 13, since I was my daughter's age. And now that I recently read through the Silmarillion and did an analytical reading of that, I definitely owe it to myself to keep that framework in mind when going back to revisit Tolkien's other work, keeping in mind all of the world building lore and thematic interests and elements that Tolkien wove throughout all of his work. However, I don't want to become just another Tolkien head. There's so many of those folks already on YouTube and Substack, people who spend their entire focus on Tolkien. I'm not going to be one of those guys, but Tolkien definitely deserves the praise and attention, even from a schmuck like me. So I'll get around to that. Anyhow, I think that's going to do it for me, ladies and gentlemen, for today. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always,